Senator McDonald.
Thank you very much. And I rise to speak about the Fair Work Amendment Paid Family and Domestic Violence Leave Bill 2022. And I do want to start by acknowledging the words of Senator Green, and my heart goes out to all of those families who have been the subject of what is truly the most awful scourge of our modern-day lives. Not a new one, of course, but I believe that domestic violence victims deserve support. I believe that support should be better targeted than what this is proposing, but mostly I want to talk about the impact on small businesses. There has been talk already of the work that small businesses are doing to support employees who are the subject of this awful act of violence against them and their children. These small businesses are already providing both paid and unpaid leave. But importantly, during the last government, it was the government who paid a cash component as well as an in-kind component. But what this legislation does is once again shifts society's responsibilities and demands for action to the people who are least able to support it. I don't, of course, speak of government. I don't, of course, speak about big corporate employers. I speak about the 42% of jobs that are created in this country by very small businesses, by mums and dads who often pay everybody else before they receive anything, by these small businesses who are currently struggling with increased electricity prices, increased superannuation payments, increased cost of living, increased transport costs. There is a myriad of costs that are being put upon small businesses whose margins are becoming thinner and thinner. And last weekend I spoke to a primary producer, a fisher person, who has a fleet of boats that goes out. Of those 5 boats, 1 is tied up on the wharves currently for a workforce shortage because those opposite don't believe in an agricultural visa. They don't understand that when you pay $15,000 per employee to come into this country, that they then have a responsibility to chase them down when they abscond to a cash-paying business. But these businesses, these small businesses, are in tears. They are on their knees. They tell me they cannot wait to get out of this employment trap because they are earning less and less. They have mortgaged their homes. They have a huge amount of stress riding on them. And yet what does this government do? It takes what was working previously. It takes a situation where government was stepping up to the plate in the responsibilities that they rightly have to support victims of domestic violence and the contribution that small businesses have, but they have taken the ball and smashed their way through the hopes and dreams and the capability of 42% of the jobs in this country. Because what we're saying to small business operators is that here is one more responsibility for you. We ask you to collect PAYG tax. We ask you to collect child custody support. We ask you to collect superannuation. We ask you to train apprentices. We ask you to support your employees in every way. But now we also are demanding that they not only have 10 days paid leave for victims of domestic violence, but that be extended to casual workers who already receive a 25% loading on their payment. I do not say this to be cruel or heartless. I'm simply trying to explain to those opposite who may or may not have run a business that the very thin margins for small businesses have been further eroded. What role are we going to provide to assist them? What of the perpetuators of domestic violence, What education systems are we putting in place? Because we know the small business operator cannot counsel their employees about these things because that's an outside of work industrial relations matter. They cannot censure their employee who they understand is perpetuating domestic violence. So we're giving all the responsibility and accountability and cost to the business, but no tools. No tools. What happens when that domestic violence victim comes to the employer, has to identify that they're a victim of domestic violence? I wish this could be called something else. I wish that the hundreds of people who write to me asking that this be called emergency leave or something else that allows employees not to be identified as a victim, that when those people have identified that, what sort of support are the employers given in the most awful example of where there is a tragedy? Is the employer then responsible to notify the police? Is the employer then taking a legal liability as being aware of domestic violence but not having reported that, or somehow being held accountable now in that terrible crime? This is a very, very serious matter that we are discussing, and nobody disputes that we should be doing everything we can to support these families in this awful situation of being trapped in their own homes in an unsafe environment. Nobody disputes that. But what we have to be certain of is that we're not creating a new set of burdens for the people who are now forced to carry that. So, as I've said, that the recommendations, to further to what Senator Cash was raising, is that the Fair Work Commission did consider all the issues proposed in the bill, some of which were put forward by the ACTU, not an employer, the representatives of the employees. And the question in the 2021 inquiry, the question of what workplace leave should be available to victims of family and domestic violence was considered in extensive detail. And in reaching its decision, the Fair Work Commission clearly did not support the breadth of the ACTU proposals and found against them. And the full bench said, compared to the ACTU claim, the provisional model term provides better alignment with existing NES entitlements and will have less impact on business in terms of employment costs and the regulatory burden. So the Fair Work Commission is supported at some times by the government, but when they make a very sound argument for not extending this to casual employees, they have been completely disregarded. Even the ACTU acknowledged that there are significant operational difficulties in extending paid family and domestic violence leave to casuals, as noted by the Fair Work Commission. Remember that there is no HR department in these businesses. There is no extensive network of administration and form fillers and so forth. These are the men and women who go home at night and do all of this in their own time. So this responsibility of holding people, of asking people to hold all the reins of running a business and paying their employees and potentially taking on additional legal liability is incredibly concerning. It is also most concerning to read in the explanatory memorandum that there will be no cost to government. Well, of course there's no cost to government because it's been passed on to somebody else who has not perpetuated the violence, who has not done this to the families, but the small business operator, they'll pay the price. So at the end of the day, if there are any small business operators left in this land, I will be surprised, because this government has no regard for them. No regard, with every single impost of cost, of regulatory burden, and it is incredibly distressing. And I wish that they would go and speak to small business operators. I wish those opposite would go and explain to them exactly what it is that this legislation will do, because perhaps then they will see the additional despair in those people's eyes. Those people who are saying, I'm going to walk away from fishing. I'm going to walk away from my small business. I will no longer have apprentices in this business. I'm carving my business down to a size that I do not have to continue taking on the cost and the responsibility that is society's rightly. This is society's burden. We acknowledge that. Everybody understands that. We must do more. But this bill is not about addressing the perpetrators of domestic violence. It is not about additional housing. It is not about additional programs. It is not even about a very smart communications program. It is about saying to small business operators, you will bear the cost of these outrageous and egregious crimes. So I support the 12-month review following on from this legislation. I'm very keen to see the impact on small businesses, the cumulative impact on small businesses, and I want to urge the government to instead continue to build on the work of the former coalition government in implementing strategies to prevent domestic violence and to support victims. Thank you.